Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hey. It's your hostess, mostest, Marissa. Happy November. Can you believe it? I cannot believe it. I committed to be Olivia Rodrigo. For everyone who listened to the Codependency anthem playlist back in July, go ahead and check out my Instagram. It's at Therapy with Marissa, my practice page, to see me as Miss Rodrigo. I hope your Halloween was amazing. What did you dress up as? Let me know. Also, friendly reminder, have you signed up for the self-validation challenge? It's 30 days to learn to validate yourself in hopes that a month from starting, you walk taller, speak louder, maintain those boundaries with more strength, and you won't be playing as small and taking up so little space. Go to www.codependency.com/challenge to sign up. And that is it. I hope you enjoy this interview with Tess. Friendly reminder, questions for reflection at the end of the show notes for a deeper listening experience. We're all about depth here. Okay, here's Tess. All right, everyone. Today we have Tess Brigham. She is a licensed psychotherapist and board-certified coach. She specializes in helping young adults learn to like their now, and discover their unique life path so they can go out into the world and make an impact. Tess, thank you for coming on the Codependency podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you, because this podcast is for young women struggling with codependency. I love working with young women and young men. What is it about young adults that you like working with them so much?
I think that it is, your 20 something years are into your early 30s. It's such a unique time of your life. And I don't think we talk about it enough, right? We talk a lot about being a teenager. We talk a lot about young adults. We have so many parenting books out there for for parents of young kids,
Right.
But very little for, how do I deal with being 25, 26. And, I often say that young people, they found me. I didn't set out to work with young people. They were who showed up. And what occurred to me was that it's a unique time that's not talked about, but it's also the world that we live in is so radically different than what it was when I was, when I was in my 20s. There was no social media. I mean, there was internet, but like it wasn't what it is today. Technology was nowhere near. We weren't glued to phones.
Right.
So the world was very different, and being young was hard even then. And then I see these young clients started coming to me, and I was like, wow, your lives are 10 times, 100 times more complicated than mine was, and I felt it was complicated at the time. So I felt like it just was I saw this real need. And I think that the impact that you can make for someone, when they're young in their 20s is so critical. I think that, you're away from your parents, you're on your own, you're figuring stuff out. And I think especially for women, I often say, like, imagine if young women could figure out these, big life questions, in their 20s, then they can conquer so much more in their 30s and 40s and 50s,
Right.
as opposed to, I think what most people go through, which is, just kind of fumbling around for many years until you're finally sort of figuring it out. And so to me, it was almost like, how do I give people answers that I wish I had at that age, you know? And it's hard. You don't want to hear it from your parents. You don't want to, your friends don't really know. And so that's why I think it's important that professionals who are these impartial people can come in and really help people figure things out for themselves.
Right. And not repeat history.
Yes.
I feel like that's one thing I notice with my patients. It's like, oh, look at all these patterns in your family.
Yes.
Do you want, like, through therapy, through coaching, through listening to podcasts like this, they can start to discover a choice when they didn't have one before. Like, do I want to choose to continue this relational pattern, or do I want to try a new one? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is huge. Which is huge. And your 20s are a great time to do this, right? Which is, when you're a teenager, when you're younger, when you're in college, like those years are hard to make these big changes. But it is in, your 20s, when you really can objectively look at your family, your parents, think a little bit more critically of them to be able to change the patterns, right? When you're young and you're under their roof and all of that, it's really hard to have that perspective. And so in order to change patterns, you have to have the perspective. And it's usually, right, which is what everyone goes through. Everyone goes through a certain breaking away of their parents, of questioning things. But if you really want to change patterns, it's part of it is being able to take a step back and then, be able to figure out, this is what I tell my clients, right? Which is, you get to decide which of your parents' habits, behaviors, thoughts, ideas that you want to adopt and keep with you, and which ones you want to let go.
Yes. Yes. Love it. And yeah, I sense that's what I did and promote. And hopefully everyone who's listening is doing that too. All right. Well, Tess, how do you define codependency?
Well, the way I always look at it is it's a dependence upon, it's this, on another person. And usually in a codependent relationship, there is one person who is more passive, that relies upon the other person to help them make decisions, to help them, live their lives. I used to work in drug and alcohol treatment centers, and codependency is something you see a lot in addiction. There's usually there's one person who's an addict, and then there's someone else who is, who has this codependent relationship where they're, cleaning up the mess of the addict and trying to manage everything that they're doing. And, the relationship, it doesn't work for either party. That's the main thing, is it doesn't work for the person who seemingly needs to be in control, right? There's one person who needs the control and needs to be able to drive things, and it's not really working for them, because they're not allowing, because they're not really living their own lives, they're living the lives of other people. And then it doesn't really work for the more passive person, because they're not able to make choices and decisions on their own.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about control?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the control of whether it's, if you have an addict trying to control like the way it looks to the outside world, like not wanting people to see the dysfunction of what's happening in your
Right.
relationship. I think there's also the control of, you see this a lot with, you might see it with a parent and a child, where a parent, might have a lot of anxiety, and their anxiety translates into wanting to control everything that the kid is doing, or over, another way of doing it is like, not allowing your kid to make decisions, or putting a lot of undue influence into what you want over what they want, right? Like,
Right.
the control part, it shows up in different ways, whether it's something that's external, of like wanting to maintain a certain look, or internal, where it's like it's about you, and you yourself are so anxious, and you're so worried about your kid, or you want them to make certain decisions, and you feel like you know better, so you're going in there and making all those decisions for them.
Right. Yes. So going back to your original definition, dependence on another, and it seemingly works, but long term it doesn't work for either party.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any experiences of codependency in your own life that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky, because my parents definitely, let me make my own decisions. They were very much, secure within themselves. It's interesting, because when I think about it, I do think that as a parent myself over the years, I'm sure I've had moments of, having a bit of codependency with my son. My son struggles with anxiety.
Mm.
He has for a long time, at a very young age, much younger than I think we ever thought it would show up. And so, for the last 5-6 years, we've been dealing with his anxiety. And there's definitely been pockets of time. I mean, I've had professionals say to me, for my husband and I, you've been way too accommodating of our son. And
Mm.
we were trying very hard to, because of his anxiety, we pulled him out of school, and we did all this stuff. So there's all these different ways in which I think we thought we were being good parents and helpful and doing the right thing, when in actuality we were helping our son avoid the things that were super scary to him.
Right.
Because he struggled with a lot of social anxiety, and we created these situations where he could, avoid those things, for various reasons. Part of it is because we had the resources to do it. And, that's part of it too, is, and, we pulled him out of school when he was really struggling in the third grade, and we pulled him out. And, my mom's a former teacher, so she was able to teach him, like, because of these various, things and resources that we had, and money and all of that, we were able to really accommodate his anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it got to, it really came to a head in fifth grade. And we ended up putting him into, one summer, he went into a program, a very intense, like, behavioral everyday program, where he really worked on the social anxiety. And when my husband and I went in, that's what they said to us was, "You're accommodating him. You've been accommodating him for years, and you need to stop. You
Right.
need to let him, be." It felt so painful at the time, but it really was like, we needed to let them, he needed to figure out how to be in the world. And
Right.
that's what they taught him at the place. And so even now, the pandemic really threw a
Oh
wrench
God.
in. I mean, if you can, I mean, it really, because the pandemic came around and suddenly, people are scary and you don't have to go out and you have to just stay in, which is what he loves to do. And so that really opened up a lot of it. But now that things are opening up again, he's been out a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, even us professionals, we fall into these patterns because you don't want to see your kids suffer. You don't want to see people struggle. It's just, and I can see it too for people with, addictions and such. I saw it a lot with parents who had kids that were addicted to drugs and alcohol. Like I totally understood why they were doing everything they could to keep their kid alive. But in actuality, it wasn't, it was just prolonging the addiction.
Right. And from your example, from your own life, and these parents who were trying to support their addict children, teens, right? Your definition, you just said like a dependence on another. And with your son and these parents with these children that you observed, your dependence of your own calm, your own like homeostasis is dependent on your son being comfortable most of the time.
Yes, it was, I think that was definitely a part of it, was wanting to make, knowing that him avoiding social situations made it easier for him. And it also made it easier for my husband and I, right? Because we didn't have to deal with the anxiety and it wasn't our intention, but what was happening was that, he and I, my husband and I both work. We were trying to like work and keep things going, right? Like we're trying to keep things operating. And it got to the point where it was just easier for us to kind of not have to have these epic battles to get him out of the house, right? Like that was what was happening. And so I think what's really important is that to understand about codependency is it's not someone doesn't wake up one day and make this decision to be codependent or to create this relationship. It happens over time, over years, over a pattern of behavior. And people's intentions are, usually good, and so that's the part that's really important for people to understand is that if you do find yourself in that kind of relationship, it's not about blame or shame or feeling like you made this huge mistake. It's really just about, and it was hard for my husband. It was hard for us to hear. It was hard for us to take in, but it was really this acceptance of, yeah, you're right. I have to own that, which is we've been accommodating him and we've got to stop. We've got to stop accommodating him. And it's incredibly difficult, but yeah, I think there's so many different, the intentions behind it and the reasons behind it can be so different, but it does come back to that sense of control, right? Where my husband and I, we were trying to control sort of keeping the peace in the household and keeping things together. That's what led to the situation. And then, with people who have addict children or spouses or parents, it's the same thing. They're trying to keep the control of the household, the person going to work, the kids going to school, all of that as a way of, just trying to make it to the next day.
Right. So looking at the underlying motive, the intention, and like you said, getting a better perspective on that can potentially create a shift towards long-term sustainable change.
Yes. That is the goal.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And with your young adults, we've heard about some of your former clients in addiction. and your son and your young adult clients, what are some ways you've observed codependent behaviors in them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main ones I see is this codependent relationship they have with, maybe one parent or both parents. It's usually one parent. Certainly, I've witnessed codependent relationships in romantic ways. I don't really work with couples. I usually work with individuals. So it's I don't see both sides of it. So it's hard to make the assessment of what's exactly going on. But
right.
What I see a lot of is the parent, and it's a lot of the kid feeling, or the young adult feeling like I need to make choices and decisions based on, what my parents say or what they think I should do or not do. You see it in different ways. It goes beyond, like, my parents want me to be a doctor, so I should be a doctor. It shows up in these, ways in which it's, where you live, being too, because I'm out here, we're in here in California. So it's like, being far away out in California, wanting them to come back home and be closer, and saying things that are subtle and not so subtle about, being far away.
Right.
I think that another way that parents do that is they control through money and finances of, you need to, if you want my help, because out here in San Francisco Bay Area, it's very expensive. So if you want my help financially, you need to do this or you need to do that. But the biggest one is really around, like how you want to live your life,
right.
and I think that's it creates such such, I don't want to say turmoil, but it's almost confusion for my clients, because on the one hand, you are, when you're growing up, like, whether you love or hate your parents have a tremendous amount of influence on your life, right?
Tremendous.
Yes. And I know that some people don't want to hear that. Like, they feel like, oh, they have none, but they really do. Their thoughts, their values, their beliefs, and that's the thing about being a kid. When we're kids, we have to do what we need to do for survival.
Right.
I often say to people that when you're a kid, you have to put up with what you put up with and deal, because you had no other choice. Children are so vulnerable. But what happens when you're an adult is you get to now make your own decisions. You get to choose what you're going to do and do it differently. And so that's the part that's really hard, is that, especially if, people had a good relationship with their parents, or it was it was a good their childhood was good. It was all of that they get into adulthood and they feel like, well, shouldn't I keep, my parents are successful people, and, they always loved and cared about me. Like, shouldn't I keep listening to them? Shouldn't I keep, doing these things? They sacrificed so much for me to go to college. Shouldn't I pursue a career that would make them happy and
right.
would make me money and all of that. And so that's what I see the most of, is this dynamic with the parents. And because in your 20 something years, you're making so many different life choices. And you're making these decisions around, where you're living, what you're working, partnership, all of that, that, all of these decisions can become overwhelming. And so there's a real sort of need or want, I think, a lot of times for the young adult to feel like, well, my parents want me to do this, and I just don't want to make any more decisions, so I'll do that. Right. Like, because decision making is always sort of the big issue with working with young adults that I see. It's always been the biggest problem, is when you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you, and you can make so many different choices and go anywhere and do anything. Yet at the same time, you're young and inexperienced and don't really, it's like you can go anywhere, but you can go nowhere, as strange as that sounds. And when I say that to my clients, they really understand it, which is, they can go anywhere, but they don't really know what they want to do. So it feels like they can go nowhere. And so, right, when you have a parent who comes along or is there, who's like saying, you should, I'm a lawyer, you should be a lawyer too. It seems like such a simple decision to make and an easy path to go.
Right. And I mean, speaking of paths, your bio, right? You help young people discover their unique life path. You've touched on this, but I'm curious, long term, how do you see codependency sabotage that discovery?
So finding your unique, when I talk about unique life path, right, where each of us has choices, right? And the choices that we make in every single day have a tremendous amount of influence on what our lives are going to turn out. Now,
tremendous. I love your vocabulary.
So, but the thing is that, right, at the same time, there's choices that we make that lead us down a road or a place that we're like, oh, I don't like that. That's not working for me. And we absolutely can change. But the biggest thing about thinking about your life and the choices that you make is they have to absolutely feel like they align with your values and who you are and what you want, what makes you happy. And so when I talk about unique life path, it's like each of us has our own things, the things that make us happy day to day. And some of them are universal, but some of them are very special and unique to us. Right. And finding the right career is really about going out there and having experiences and starting to learn, I like this, but I don't like that. I want more of this, but I want less of that. And it takes time and energy and all of that. But if you keep if you keep sitting down and really making choices and decisions based on this is what I want, this is what I need, you will continue to move towards a direction that will, make you happy, that will give you the satisfaction that you need. Anytime I work with a client who's sort of at a crossroads in their lives, if you backtrack with them a little bit, they'll see very clearly, like somewhere around here, when I decided, I keep coming up to law school because I work with a lot of lawyers. So, and that is one where, a lot of people get to the other side of being a lawyer and feel some question, they start to question things, and they start to think like a couple, oh yeah, it was around law school and why I went to law school and the choice that I made to go to law school, led me, to here. And they can go backtrack and see very clearly, the thought processes and the feelings and the value, what was going on to see why they made that decision.
Right.
And so that's the piece of it is that if you have this codependent relationship, whether it's with a parent or a partner, if you are, if you've got someone in your life who you feel like is dictating or feeling like they are constantly, pushing you to where they think you should go, you're going to end up on a road or a path that feels nowhere near what it is that you really want.
Right.
So the process of finding your life path is it's a combination of, reflection, and it's a combination of exploration. That's the best way to do this. You have to go out, you have to live your life, you have to have experiences. Unfortunately, with jobs, especially, like you kind of don't know if you like something or not until you're in it, right? So you got to take these jobs and do these things and experience them so you can figure out what you like and what you don't like as you're going along. So if you've got someone who's in your life that's constantly making you confused, right? Because the process of it is, it's such a personal thing, it's really about you listening to yourself and asking yourself, like, wait, do I want that? Do I not? Like, how did I feel when I sat there and did that thing? Did I like it? Right. And so if you have someone who's whispering in your ear, constantly telling you, no, you shouldn't like it, or you should like it, or whatever it is, then that creates such confusion. Right. And what I see with clients is that a lot of times that confusion keeps them stuck. So they end up making no decisions, right? Like they are so overwhelmed by this other person commenting on everything that they're doing. And yet they have this other feeling or sense of self of like, but I feel like it should be this. that what happens is they go neither direction. They just stay stuck.
Right.
And, and that's a big, big problem because, eventually if you don't make a decision or a choice will be made for you, and you don't always, that's not always what you want. And then, or eventually you wake up and you realize I've spent the last 3-4 years at a job I hate, or in a relationship, or in a city that I don't like. And I've been too afraid to, go one way or the other.
3 or 4 years, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or
it could be longer.
Could be 5, 10, a marriage, throw a couple kids in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, right, long term, there are consequences, everybody, to listening and being so dependent on others, parent, partner, mentor, while ignoring, doubting, questioning, like you said, that unique life path. And I mean, Tess, I hear you, right? You're like, you have to work the jobs. You have to experiment. you have to trial and error. And yet I have therapy patients. I've had listeners from the podcast who have said sentences verbatim, but I'm 23 and I'm behind. Or I'm 25 and it's too late. I mean, at such a vulnerable age, how can a young adult let go of what everybody else is thinking, especially if they're codependent, to like their now?
Yeah, the comparisonitis is, and I hear this a lot too. I hear this all the time. I'm behind, I'm this, I'm that. And what I say is, listen, life is long. Life is long. Careers are long. I understand that. I remember being in my 20s and feeling like, oh my God, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. But it really is about, well, first one is, what I see, what drives so much comparisonitis is the biggest culprit is social media. So, I highly recommend, if you are someone who struggles with this, to give yourself a bit of a social media break, take some time off from it. And what I'll tell clients is, like, give yourself a couple days and just see how you feel. Like, how do you feel? Have you missed anything? Is life, are you out of the loop, or do you find that you're feeling a lot better about yourself? Because, social media creates, even though we know it is false, it creates this false sense of that people are more successful than I am, or people are in better states, right? Like, you go on LinkedIn and everyone's like, here, I'm talking here, I'm launching this, I'm doing that, look at me go, right? And so it can feel very easy to just simply feel like I'm behind and I'm not getting stuff done. But so if you can let go of social media as much as you can, or just limit it to like less than 20 minutes a day. But the other part of it too is that it's recognizing that the goal in life is it's not about like getting to the finish line first. It's not about that. It's really about creating a life that you like, liking your now, like creating a world for yourself in the here and now that you enjoy. And if there are aspects of your life that aren't exactly what you want them to be, that you're actively taking steps to change that and to move into a different direction. And that's not always, it's hard when you're young to see it. And many times I'll tell clients, like, I know some of these things, not because I'm, some genius. It's just because I'm older, that I know, and I've been through it and I've seen it. But, just remember, life is long. It really is. Life is long. Careers are long. And truly no one is an overnight success. That's the part that's really important. I used to work in, Hollywood. I used to live in LA, and any actor that we had that was like having, great success, even if they were 22, 23, they had been working since they were 10. Like that's the part that people don't see so much, which is if you see some, 25-year-old having some huge success or whatever it is, it's like most likely they've been at it for decades.
Right.
It really does take a certain length of time, 10 years or such, whatever the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell came up with. It really does take that amount of time to get really good at something. And then, first it takes time to figure out what it is that you want to do.
Right.
And how you want to live your life. And then once you figure that out, then it takes you, a good 10 years to get really good at it and feel like you're at this next level. And then it takes even more time to really, once you're good at it, to really hone in on what's the specific thing that I'm going to work on or do, what's my niche, and that all takes a lot of time. And I know this isn't always what people want to hear, but it wasn't until I was like in my 40s that I really felt confident in what I was doing. Like this was my career. This is what I was doing. And it felt right and good. And, that I managed to work myself into a situation, into a place where I was able to really enjoy, I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And so I think the hard part is that it isn't necessarily what people want to hear. And so people don't talk about it. They don't want to hear that part of it. Doesn't mean that you have to suffer until your 40s.
No.
It just means that it's about having realistic expectations of the fact that you might feel really like uncomfortable the first umpteen times you give a presentation. You might feel like you might struggle with imposter syndrome and some of these other things, while you're at work. And that doesn't mean that you're not good at what you do or that you're behind or any of those things.
Right.
But it just means that over time, time just helps you get more confident in what you're doing. And so, right, like it's not about this race. I think that's the main thing when I hear people about wasting time, right?
It's not about, no. And right, it's not a race. So thank you, Comparisonitis, for how you help. I'm sure you help somehow, and also you don't. It's not a race, and it's for codependence. It's not long-term about pleasing everyone. That, long-term, that is not going to work, fulfill, sustain you. Yeah. I think a lot of young people, I know in my experience as well, I did a lot of what I thought other people suggested, or what I saw other people doing online, and being critical, thoughtful, reflective helped me build awareness on what was in alignment with what I truly valued and what wasn't, and being able to let that go. But it was hard. I don't know, while you were talking, I had a very plain wedding. And I have friends and family who were providing feedback, input, and suggestions on ways to have it be more glamorous and Instagram worthy. Like my cake was so basic, but I was like, we're going to eat it. We're going to eat the cake. And being reflective. My parents have one wedding photo up in the house, right? They've been married forever. And that's what they have to show, because it's just a bunch of like kid pictures and vacations and everything else that has filled their life. So that helped me not be so focused on what others were doing or other suggestions. Because it was like, that it just doesn't ultimately matter. It's not in alignment with what I value.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know why.
Weddings are tough. I don't know what it is about weddings, but they just bring out, like, I remember planning my wedding. I think I was 30 when I got married, and I think my mom and I fought like I was, 14 again. It was crazy. Just this battle of,
was she trying to control?
A bit of it. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think she had, right. She obviously had her own visions of things and things that she saw and all of that. And, I mean, my parents were paying for it. So there's that angle too, which is like, there is that feeling of it. My parents are divorced. So I have to say my father was the easiest to deal with. He paid for the bulk of it. And he was very much like, he doesn't really have too many friends. He was just kind of like, well, tell me where to show up,
Wow.
So, but I definitely remember those days. It was just such a nightmare. Weddings are one that are rough.
It's
sure
one of multiple stressors and milestones these young adults that we have to pass through. Right. Yes. Like you said, it can just bring up everything. So
yes. No, and I understand why people rush off and just elope and do their own thing. And because it makes complete sense to me now why someone would do that. Because there's so many dynamics between these two families and all of that it can be really exhausting.
Yes. Exhausting. All right. Well, with your clients, what is one of your favorite tools, techniques, strategies to help them develop more interdependent as opposed to codependent behaviors?
Definitely when it comes to codependency, it's all about boundaries. Like, and you will hear people talk about boundaries constantly. And, I think that it's really important for people to hear that boundaries are a very, very good thing, that boundaries are your way of communicating with the people in your life, how you want to be treated, how you want this relationship to be. And it's the thing about boundaries is it's one thing to set a boundary, it's another thing to stick to it. And I think that my clients really struggle with, well, I set the boundary, but then they did it anyway. And it's like, yeah, you might have to set that boundary 5, 10, 15 times. It might be a long time. I mean, if you have this dynamic with this person and it's been going on for 10, 15, 20 years, they're not going to get it overnight. No one does. Right. And so that's the part that's hard is that it's really about understanding that if you want this dynamic to change, if you want to have a different relationship with your partner or your parents, that you cannot control them and that it really is on you to change your behavior. And yes, if you change your behavior and you stick to the boundaries over time, the other person will change too. This is just, you talk about, like, we learn this in graduate school, right? It's a thermostat, relationships, right? If one person changes, it automatically forces the other person to change and adapt to that first person's change, just like your thermostat does in your house. And so, but again, like anything else, it's not going to happen overnight. So it's really being able to see first that, having boundaries with people is a good thing. Having these invisible lines where you draw, lines in the sand with people, it's a good thing, but it's just going to take time sometimes. And that just because you said it once doesn't mean that it was wrong or bad. And just because they're not listening to it doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad, or it wasn't the right thing to do. It just means that they're struggling with the changes. And that's not on you. You just need to focus on what you're doing.
Right.
So it is hard. A lot of it is about being able to, figure it really starts with you figuring out for yourself, like, what is it that I really want? What are the, what's the relationship that I do want with this person? Do I want to hear their opinion, but about these certain things, and there's certain things that I don't want to hear their opinion about, or I would prefer that they ask my permission before they jumped into their, opinion, or whatever it is. It really starts with you figuring out for yourself, like, what is it that I want? And I know that can be hard when you've had someone speaking to you, but it really requires you to stop and just listen to yourself. Listen, because we all have these internal things, like whether we're aware of it or not, we all have our own instincts about who we are and ourselves and what we like and what we don't like. We just, don't always want to own it or own up to it because it feels really scary.
Right.
But it really does start with becoming more aware and mindful of what are these things, what is it that I'm telling myself? What is it that I want? And then figuring out what the boundary is, communicating the boundary, and then sticking with the boundary.
Yes.
But those are the main, and boundaries are something you can work on, right? For years and years. So, I mean, if you just focus on, I'm going to set boundaries with people, then that will take a lot of time and attention just there,
right.
Just focusing on that. But it'll have a tremendous amount of benefit to you if you do it, you stick to it, and trust it, and don't. Part of it too is recognizing, and I think this is something that happens for people, young adults, is it's you get outside of your parents, and no matter what kind of relationship you have with them, you're really able to see them in a new light, and you're able to see your parents as human beings, and that they're flawed, and that, while they seem, when you were younger, they seem larger than life, or they knew all the answers, that, okay, my parents are just people who make mistakes, people who, fall down, and so that part's really important to recognize for yourself. Like, boundaries are not about pushing people away or saying you've done bad or I don't like you. It's really about saying, like, okay, I see our relationship much clearer now. And I see myself much clearer now. And this is what I'm asking for. And this is what I need. And again, I think the hardest part of it is sometimes you'll set boundaries with people and they won't respect them, and you might have to reinforce it. And then eventually you might have to decide that they're not in your life so much anymore. And that's really difficult too.
Right. And it's also okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So boundaries. And then you're reminding me of sometimes I call it the broken record technique. You're just a broken record with the same song playing with the same boundary being restated. Just it's okay. Just say it over and over again. Same tone. Yeah. Just broken record. They'll hear it eventually.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tess, thank you so much for coming on. And what resource do you have to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I have this, it's a quarter life crisis handbook.
I love
and
that. I needed that.
And so it's beneficial to you whether you're going through a quarter life crisis or you think you're going through a quarter life crisis. It's really I'm asking you a series of questions around, a lot of the things that we're talking about here. Where are you in your life? What's working, what's not working, what do you need more of, what do you need less of? And it just helps you sort of evaluate where you are right now and where you want to go and what you want to work on.
Wow. Awesome. So I will put a link to that in the show notes, as well as your website, contact information. And I know you have some things, I can't think of a metaphor, on the way. So just everyone keep checking out Tess's content. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me Marissa at codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.